Welcome to this incredible story. Today, we'll explore the truth that money cannot fill the void of a broken heart. This is the saga of a man who had everything and lost it all to fear, and a woman who lost everything and gained her own strength. To support this story of redemption, hit like now, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Do you believe that regret can truly change a man? Comment your opinion. The breaking point. He chose silence. The foyer was silent, save for the ticking of a clock deep inside the house. A sound too slow, too quiet for the moment unfolding. Clara Hayes stood near the staircase, one hand resting on the curve of her abdomen as if to protect the life growing within. Her other hand held a small overnight bag, not because she had prepared to leave, but because instinct had told her she would need it. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel the rhythm in her fingertips. The home around them once felt warm and safe, filled with soft light, delicate flowers, laughter echoing across the marble floors. Now it felt like a museum of illusions, a place where love seemed real until it shattered. Marcus Valera stood opposite her. He looked like perfection, carved from expensive stone. Tall, broad-shouldered, neatly styled dark hair, icy blue eyes that once softened when they looked at her. He had always held himself with the confidence of a man who shaped the world rather than moved within it. Tonight, however, that confidence was taut, rigid, with a sharp, dangerous edge. His jaw was clenched. His hands were fists at his sides, not raised, but ready to wound with words instead of touch. She had told him just minutes before. She had taken a breath, placed her hand over her stomach, and said quietly, "I'm pregnant." The words had been full of hopeful fear, the kind of fear that blooms when something is too precious to lose. She thought he might be surprised. She thought he might grow silent at first, then move toward her, touch her cheek, ask if she was okay, ask what she needed. She had allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, a future. But instead, his silence had chilled everything in the room. His eyes had changed first, the blue turning cold like winter ice. Then, his expression had collapsed into something she had never seen before. Not sadness, not confusion, but fury. Fear disguised as rage. He took a step toward her, but not to reach for her. "No," he said, his voice low, too controlled. "No, Clara. You don't understand. I can't do this. I can't have this. Not now, not ever." His voice rose with each phrase, fraying into something sharp and uneven. "You promised me. You said you were being careful. You said this wouldn't happen." She felt the words hit her like punches, but she stood still. She had known that a part of him feared vulnerability, feared needing someone, feared letting anyone inside the steel fortress he had built around his life. But she hadn't known how deep that fear ran. "I didn't lie," she said softly. "I didn't plan this. I'm scared too. But this is ours. This is real. We can figure it out. Together." Her voice trembled, but her gaze did not. She loved him. She wasn't ashamed of that. That only seemed to enrage him further. He paced a few steps, then returned, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to erase the world unfolding before him. "You don't understand," he snapped. "I built everything to avoid this. All of it. Attachment, dependency, chaos. Family destroys. It ruins. I will not be trapped." She stared at him, stunned. "Trapped? You think a child is a trap?" He turned on her, and for the first time, there was something almost desperate in his expression, as if he were speaking from a wound that existed long before she walked into his life. "Yes," he said. "I do." The clock ticked again. Soft. Unforgiving. Her fingers tightened around her bag. She could have begged. She could have tried again to explain that love was not a prison, that family was not a cage. She could have reminded him of the nights they spent together, whispering about futures they were afraid to name. But something inside her, perhaps the mother she had already become, stood up in her stead. "If I walk out that door," she said quietly, "I won't walk back in." For a split second, she thought he might ask her to stay. His eyes flickered, something raw, something breaking. But then his fear won. "Get out of my house," he said. This time his voice was louder, sharper, final. She backed away. The floor felt unsteady beneath her feet. The bag felt heavier than her bones. Her heart felt as if it were tearing apart inside, silently, soundlessly. She walked out the door. She did not look back. The cold night air hit her like a slap. She clutched her stomach. The life inside her shifted, just a flutter, just enough to remind her she was not alone. She did not cry, because sometimes the pain is too deep for tears. And that night, the house behind her remained warm and bright, but the man inside it had already lost everything. He just didn't know it yet. 5 years of solitude and strength. She moved to a different state because she couldn't stay where the memories were. The town she chose was smaller, quieter, with bare-limbed streets that swayed and shivered in the winter wind. The apartment she found was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building that smelled faintly of dust and coffee. The staircase creaked when she climbed it, and sometimes the heat wouldn't kick in until midday. But it was hers, not borrowed, not disposable, not something someone else could take back with a single sentence. The pregnancy was harder than she expected. Some mornings, she could barely pull herself up without gripping the wall. There were nights she lay awake, one hand on her belly, whispering to the children yet to open their eyes. "I won't let the world be cruel to you. I won't let you feel unwanted. I won't let you grow up in the cold." The fear was real, but so was the determination. It came from a deeper place than words. She had lost something when she walked out of that house, but she had gained something far more unbreakable, a reason to survive. She found work online, graphic design, small commissions, freelance ads. Not enough to make life easy, but enough to keep the lights on and food in the kitchen. She worked sitting up in bed with her laptop balanced over the curve of her stomach, stretching her aching back every hour. Sometimes, tears burned behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from exhaustion. And yet, when she felt the baby's kick, the world steadied again. It reminded her she wasn't walking through the dark alone. The day the twins were born, the sky outside was gray and heavy, as if winter had wrapped itself around the city. The hospital room was bright, too bright, the walls clean and white and indifferent. The labor was long, and the pain came in waves so intense she thought her bones might splinter. But she held on. She pushed through, and when the first baby cried, a sharp, bright sound like a lightning bolt splitting the sky, something within her cracked wide open. When the second baby arrived only minutes later, the room filled with sound. 2 voices, 2 lives, 2 beginnings. They placed the babies in her arms, 2 tiny bodies bundled in identical white blankets. They were warm and impossibly small, and their eyes, when they opened, were blue, clear, bright, and familiar. Her breath hitched in her throat, and she stayed there. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. She could only stare and feel the world reorganize around these 2 new hearts. She named the first Sophia. It meant wisdom, strength of spirit. She named the second Eve. It meant life, the breath of existence, the beginning of something new. Together, the names felt like a promise, a prayer, a vow. The years began to pass, not quickly, but steadily. She watched Sophia and Eve grow. They learned to laugh, to crawl, to walk with their tiny arms raised in triumph. Their hair became long and golden like sunshine. Their eyes were oceans. And every day, when she looked at them, she saw him. Sometimes she wondered if he ever thought of her, if he ever thought of them, if he lay awake in a house filled with silence, unaware that somewhere, two little girls with his eyes were learning to speak their first words. But she didn't let those questions linger. The past had taken enough from her. She was building something new now. Not perfect, not stable, not glamorous, but real. And what is real is stronger than everything that breaks. 3. The encounter. Eyes that broke the ice. Marcus Valera did not measure his time in seasons, birthdays, or holidays. He measured it in headlines, contracts, flights, and boardrooms filled with polished tables and people who took notes when he spoke. He built his empire higher and higher, expanding into markets he used to only dream of. His face appeared on magazine covers, in interviews where he spoke of discipline, vision, efficiency. People admired him. Competitors feared him. Investors trusted him. But admiration is a thin substitute for meaning. Every night, when the city quieted and the lights in his penthouse automatically dimmed at midnight, the silence waited. He learned to fall asleep with music playing softly in the background because pure silence felt unbearable. It wasn't noise he needed. It was something to drown out the memory of a voice he once loved. He couldn't recall the exact sound of hers, only its warmth, and the loss of that warmth tormented him more than any failure. He had convinced himself that if he just kept moving, kept building, kept climbing, then there would be no room for regret. That was what he believed, or what he tried to believe. He had designed a room to be a study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. People said it must feel powerful to stand there and see everything from above. But all he saw was distance. And there were nights, far more than he admitted to himself, when he paused at the doorway of the guest bedroom down the hall. The room was empty, but he pictured it full in another way. A small bed, soft toys, laughter, mess, life. The vision only lasted a second before he locked it away, but it returned every night, uninvited. He sometimes allowed himself to imagine what the child would look like, and then forced himself to stop, because hope was too dangerous. But there was one thing he couldn't stop. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how deeply he ordered the thought, he missed her. He missed who he was when he was with her. He missed the part of himself he had thrown away, and he had no idea that somewhere, in a small town he'd never bothered to visit, two little girls were growing up with his eyes, his smile, and his laugh. Two pieces of his heart living outside of him, waiting for the day fate would bring them back into his world. The winter had a way of making the small town feel softer, as if the world had been draped in a quiet blanket that muffled the edges of everything sharp. Snow clung to the rooftops, the streetlights, the bare branches of the maples lining the sidewalks. People moved slowly, bundled in thick coats and scarves, their breaths forming soft clouds in the cold air. Clara liked winter for that reason. It made the world gentle, and gentleness was something she fought hard to protect. She and the girls had a ritual of visiting a small corner cafe every Saturday morning. It was a cozy spot with warm lighting, wooden tables, and the smell of cinnamon and coffee floating in the air. Sophia and Eve loved it because the waiter always gave them extra marshmallows for their cocoa, and because there was a big window where they could watch the snowflakes fall and pretend they were tiny stars. This morning felt like any other. The girls were seated on either side of Clara, their blonde hair tied in messy braids, their cheeks rosy from the cold. Sophia meticulously decorated a sugar cookie with colored icing, sticking out her tongue in concentration, while Eve insisted her snowman cookie needed just a little more sparkle, which meant an unreasonable quantity of sprinkles. Clara watched them with a soft, tired smile, the kind of smile that comes from loving so deeply it hurts. She didn't notice him at first. The cafe door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and the sound of muffled traffic. A man walked in, brushing snow from the shoulders of his coat. He was tall, his wool coat dark charcoal, his scarf loosely wrapped around his neck. His hair was a shade of gold that caught the light, and his blue eyes scanned the cafe with the absent awareness of someone looking for a place to sit. He looked like any other customer on a winter morning, but when he turned his head, something in the air shifted. Clara felt it before she saw him, a pressure in her chest, a sudden stillness. She looked up, and the world around her seemed to fade. Time didn't stop, but it stretched. Slow, heavy, almost fragile. Marcus. He was older, though only by a few years. His features were sharper now, carved by stress and quiet, sleepless nights. His posture still held authority, but he looked weary in a way she had never seen before. The confidence he once wore as armor now seemed thinner, cracked at the edges. But his eyes were the same blue she remembered, the same blue that once felt like home. He saw her, and then he saw them. Sophia looked up first, innocently, smiling as she offered her cookie for Clara's admiration. Her blue eyes, his eyes, sparkled with uncomplicated joy. Eve followed, her laughter bubbling over as she scattered sprinkles across the table by accident. The resemblance was undeniable. They were mirrors of him in miniature form, reflections of a life he had once rejected. Marcus stopped breathing for a moment. Not literally, but in the way a person does when the world moves beneath their feet. His gaze locked onto the twins, and something inside him shattered without a sound. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no need for explanation. The recognition was immediate and absolute. The truth hit him with such force that his hands trembled at his sides. He walked toward them slowly, as if every step might break the fragile moment. His expression held so many things at once that Clara could barely read it. Shock, disbelief, regret, awe, and something deeper, something raw and painful. He reached the table. Clara's heart was pounding so hard, she thought the whole room must hear it. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Sophia blinked up at him. "Hello," she said cheerfully, completely unaware of the history swelling around them. His voice came out unsteady, like a man learning to speak again. "Hello?" Eve tilted her head. "You look like us," she announced with the blunt certainty of a child. Clara felt tears press against her throat. Marcus's gaze darted to Clara. There were no walls in his eyes now, no coldness, no distance. The man who once stood like stone now looked utterly undone. "Clara," he whispered. She could have looked away. She could have run as he once had. But she didn't. She held his gaze, steady and quiet. "Yes," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. She had learned to be strong. His breath hitched. "Are they mine?" It wasn't a question. Clara nodded. The sound that escaped him was not a shout. It was softer, an exhalation of grief, wonder, and devastation, all tangled together. He knelt down, uncaring who in the cafe might be watching. Sophia reached out and touched his hair, curious. Eve leaned closer. He looked at them as if they were sacred. "I'm so sorry," he said. The words barely passed his lips, but they were real. For the first time, he understood exactly what he had lost. And for the first time, Clara saw him not as the man who forced her out into the cold, but as a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices, finally ready to see what mattered. Interaction time. Marcus's shock and regret are profound. If you were Clara, what would you say to him in that moment? Would you immediately allow him to know his daughters, or would you make him wait? Comment your honest reaction. 4. Building a bridge. Step by step, he returned the next day. Not with grand gestures or gifts or rehearsed apologies meant to sound noble. He simply arrived, standing outside the cafe before it opened, his hands deep in his coat pockets as his breath clouded in the cold morning air. Clara saw him through the window when she arrived with the twins, their small hands wrapped in hers, their scarves crooked and wool hats slipped sideways. For a moment she stood perfectly still, unsure if she should turn and leave. But the girls nudged her forward, and she understood that this moment was no longer just about her. They sat at the same table. Sophia and Eve, unbothered by adult complexities, began building shapes out of sugar packets while Clara wrapped her hands around a hot mug. Marcus sat opposite her. He looked different now, as if something inside him had painfully softened overnight. He didn't rush to speak. He didn't defend himself. He didn't demand explanations or forgiveness. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, firm in the way someone sounds when their chest is full of things they aren't sure they have the right to ask for. Tell me about them. He could have said 1,000 things, but he chose that. Not tell me why you left. Not why didn't you tell me. Not how dare you. He chose to ask about the girls first. That mattered. Clara breathed slowly, choosing her words not for his comfort, but for the truth. She told him how Eve had walked first, bold and decisive, refusing to fall even when her legs wobbled. How Sophia had talked first, her voice clear, forming words like delicate pearls. How they laughed differently, slept differently, had unique fears and joys only to their hearts. She spoke of fevers and lullabies, of small triumphs, of birthdays celebrated with cakes she baked at midnight after finishing work. She didn't mention the nights she cried alone. She didn't have to. Those lived in the silence between her sentences. Marcus listened, truly listened. Not with the polite attention of businessmen or the calculating gaze of someone collecting data. His eyes were fixed, open. When they rose to leave, Eve held up her arms to him without hesitation. Sophia followed a moment later. He froze, his breath catching, before gently scooping both girls into his arms. They fit there naturally, as if they had always belonged in that space. His eyes closed for a moment as he held them. Clara saw a man holding everything he once threw away, now treating it as if it were made of glass. Then, he walked them home. Not close, not touching Clara, but matching her pace. The world around them was quiet, save for the crunch of the snow beneath their boots. He didn't try to fill the silence with questions or explanations. He carried it carefully, understanding how fragile it was. When they reached the doorway of her building, Clara stood on the bottom step, looking at him. "I'm not asking for anything," he said before she could speak. "Not forgiveness, not a place, not a second chance. I know I don't deserve those yet. I just want to be here, to know them, to try to be someone they don't have to be ashamed of." There was no pleading in his voice, no manipulation, just truth, unvarnished, unreserved, human. Clara's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment so many times she had stopped believing it would ever come. Yet here it was, quiet, heavy, real. "You can be in their lives," she said, "but slowly, carefully, not like someone who drifts in and out when it suits you. If you walk into their hearts, they won't let you go." Her voice cracked slightly. "I know." She nodded, then added softly, And if you hurt them, I will never let you back in." This time he didn't flinch. He simply nodded, accepting the truth as a vow. He looked up at the stairs where the girls had disappeared. "I won't leave," he said. Not a promise made to convince, a promise spoken because he finally understood the cost of breaking one. And for the first time since the day she walked out of his house, Clara believed him. The open ending, silence, and the unfinished promise. The winter slowly turned to spring, the kind of spring where the snow melts unevenly and leaves patches of green grass poking through like soft promises. Life didn't change with a rush, but gradually, in the kind of quiet progression you only notice when you stop long enough to look back. Marcus began spending afternoons with the twins. At first, he visited only in public places, the park, the cafe, the children's section of the library. He was getting to know them, not as an idea, not as a symbol of regret or redemption, but as real girls with thoughts and flaws and messy joys. Sophia walked beside him, holding two of his fingers instead of his whole hand, as if she needed independence but on her own terms. Eve declared herself the queen of the world, to which Marcus would solemnly bow. He watched them constantly, not with panic, but with the attention of someone who knows what it means to lose something once. He began to understand their personalities in ways Clara had figured out long ago. Sophia was cautious, thoughtful, always considering the world before stepping into it. Eve was fearless, ready to leap first and consider the consequences later. They balanced each other, quiet wisdom and wild joy, and as Marcus spent time with them, something inside him began to settle. His movements grew softer, his voice modulated without losing strength. The girls didn't change him. They revealed him. Clara watched this from a careful distance. Not with coldness, not with suspicion, simply conscious. She was getting to know him again, just as he was getting to know them. There were moments, though, when the past surfaced. One such moment came during a rainy afternoon. They were in Clara's apartment because the weather made the park impossible. "Before you came, Mommy cried a lot," Eve said, unprompted. The words dropped into the room with weight. Sophia looked up, her expression thoughtful, not ashamed, simply honest. "We hugged her," she added softly. The silence that followed was fragile. Marcus looked at Clara, and this time his eyes did not avoid the truth. He didn't defend himself. He didn't say he was different now. He simply nodded slowly and said, "Thank you for taking care of her." It wasn't an apology. It was something deeper, recognition. "Don't hurt them," Clara said quietly. "Don't hurt me again." It was a truth spoken from the scar tissue. Marcus leaned forward, gently resting his hand on the floor near hers. Not touching, just close. Close enough to say, "I hear you." "I won't," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that came from somewhere deep, somewhere real. The summer faded into autumn, and the air became cool and bright, the leaves turning golden and amber. The change happened gently, not through a single dramatic moment, but through the slow configuring of days. Life had woven itself into small, unmistakable threads. Marcus left a spare sweater at Clara's apartment. The twins' drawings, now in Eve's Queen of the Mountain style, ended up pinned to his stylish office wall. His phone lock screen changed to a picture of Sophia asleep on his shoulder, and Eve tangled in his scarf. He found a house. Not like the cold palace of his past, but one that nestled near a lake, where the water reflected the sky in soft ripples. The structure was simple, with wide windows that flooded the rooms with light. It felt peaceful, but it didn't demand silence. "I didn't buy it to replace anything," he said quietly, not looking at the house but at her. "I wanted to build something that starts from now, something real, with you." with them. Not as an apology, as a future. We'll move slowly, she said softly. As slowly as you want. He nodded. The move wasn't perfect. They still weren't living under the same roof. Not officially. He gave up his penthouse and moved into an apartment nearby. But he spent every evening at the new house, helping Clara unpack and assemble the furniture their daughters tried to help build. On the first night in the new house, the kitchen table was not yet assembled. The girls fell asleep in a pile of blankets, curled up like two halves of the same dream. Clara sat beside them on the floor. Marcus sat next to her. The house was quiet, but not empty. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. He did not freeze. He gently leaned into her, matching her breathing without trying to possess her. There were no promises of forever love, no words of final forgiveness. Only shared breathing. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. The world felt steady, real, alive. Their story did not end with reconciliation or perfection. It ended with a simple choice, the choice to be present. Love hadn't fully returned. It was growing, slowly and tenderly, out of everything they had survived. And the question that hovered in the warm air of the new house, the question they did not need to answer, was, where would this new beginning go now? Will the co-parenting solidify into a partnership, or will this quiet stillness be the silent rebirth of the love that once turned cruel? If you loved this journey of redemption, subscribe to the channel and share this story. We'll see you in the next emotional saga. 6. The cost of clean slate. The quiet days by the lake were deceptive. They were filled with the happy, exhausting chaos of young children. But underneath the surface, the business world Marcus had abandoned was fighting for his attention. He had resigned from his CEO position, but he still held the majority of shares in his international holdings. Shares that represented the very fear of commitment that had driven him away from Clara years ago. One crisp Saturday morning, while Clara was outside teaching Sophia and Eve how to distinguish between a maple leaf and an oak leaf, Marcus sat in the study, a space he had converted from a spare bedroom, taking a video call. His expression was tight, rigid with the stress he hadn't worn in months. The board needs your final decision, Marcus. Victor Stone, his former COO, now his chief legal counsel, stated plainly on the screen. They are offering to buy you out, a very generous package that guarantees security for life. But they need you to sever ties completely. Sell or lead. They won't accept the silent owner in Vermont. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, glancing out the window at Clara's silhouette. The money didn't matter. It was the control that still held him, the control his father had instilled in him, the belief that power equaled safety. The money is irrelevant, Victor. If I sell, I lose the ability to ensure the company doesn't fall into unethical hands. And if you don't sell, you are constantly tied to New York, to board meetings, to a life Clara walked away from. Victor countered gently. You said you needed a clean slate, Marcus. This is the price of that slate. That night, after the twins were finally asleep, Sophia insisting on one last story about a brave princess, and Eve demanding Marcus check under the bed for friendly monsters. Clara found him on the porch, staring out at the moonlight shimmering on the lake. Trouble in paradise? She asked softly, handing him a mug of herbal tea. Marcus accepted the tea, the warmth grounding him. The old life is asking for a final answer. They want me out, permanently. And what does permanent mean for you? Clara sat beside him, leaving a small, respectful gap. It means giving up the last piece of the empire I built, the last thing that proves I was successful on the world's terms. He looked at her, his blue eyes troubled. It means being just Marcus, the guy who tells bad dad jokes and knows how to assemble an IKEA crib. Clara took a sip of her tea, her gaze fixed on the lake. When I left New York, I lost everything that proved I was successful on their terms too. My job, my security, the illusion of a partner, it was terrifying. But you rebuilt. I rebuilt on the things that mattered, she affirmed. On those two small, loud humans. On my own resilience. Your success now isn't in a bank account, Marcus. It's in the fact that you haven't checked your phone since dinner, and that your youngest daughter will only fall asleep holding your hand. She turned, closing the gap between them. I won't tell you what to do with your company, but if you keep a foot in that world because you're afraid of being just Marcus, then you're still living by the fear that drove you away from us once before. Choose what truly makes you safe. Marcus looked at the lake, then at the strong, steady woman beside him. He realized that the ultimate act of courage wasn't conquering a boardroom. It was surrendering the need to control through power. The next morning, he made the call to Victor. Sell it all. Liquidate every asset, including the penthouse. I want nothing left in New York that ties me to that past. When he hung up, he felt a profound sense of lightness. The fear was replaced by a quiet certainty. He was ready to be just Marcus. 7. The rebirth of love. The tension lifted from the house almost immediately. Marcus threw himself into the local community, using his organizational skills to help the town establish a new environmental fund for the lake. He was simply Marcus, an enthusiastic resident, no longer a tycoon. The shift in their relationship was quiet, almost imperceptible, moving beyond co-parenting into something more tender. One evening, during a chaotic bath time, Sophia insisting on wearing a Viking helmet made of shampoo foam, and Eve pouring glitter into the bubble bath, Clara slipped on the wet floor. Marcus caught her instantly, his arms wrapping around her waist. For a moment they were pressed close, the chaos of the twins forgotten. The air crackled with a familiarity that had nothing to do with shared parenting. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his blue eyes searching hers. "I'm fine," she murmured, but she didn't pull away. "You smell like baby shampoo and determination," he noted, a genuine, easy smile reaching his eyes. Clara laughed, a light, genuine sound that he hadn't heard in their New York life. "That's my new signature scent." He held her for a moment longer, the contact warm and strong. This was not the desperate physicality of their past. This was a mature, slow-burning intimacy built on shared struggle and mutual respect. Later, while sitting by the fireplace, the sound of the twins breathing softly from the next room, Clara broke the comfortable silence. "That night," she began, her voice soft, recalling the moment he forced her out of his house. "When I said I wouldn't walk back in, I meant it. But you haven't asked me to." "I know," Marcus said, placing his hand near hers on the sofa, still not quite touching. "I haven't asked you to walk back into the old house, Clara. I've just been hoping you'd choose to build a new one with me, right here." Clara finally closed the gap, her fingers resting gently over his. "When you sold the company, I realized you weren't trying to buy my forgiveness. You were choosing your future. You were choosing us. Always," he confirmed, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "But I need to know, is there room for more than just co-parents after everything?" Clara looked at the firelight dancing across the room, then at his earnest, hopeful face. "There is, but only if we promise that the man who ran away is truly gone. He is. He got off the plane and never looked back," Marcus promised, his voice low and firm. This time, the kiss was slow, careful, not a desperate plea for connection, but a gentle confirmation of a bond that had survived the impossible. It was a kiss of shared parenthood, deep respect, and the quiet rebirth of love. Date: the final promise. Conclusion. The following spring, they stood on the deck of their lake house. The twins, now sturdy and bright 6-year-olds, were attempting to fish off the dock with wooden poles, and Marcus's patient supervision. Clara watched them, leaning against the railing, her hand resting on the small swell of her abdomen. Marcus walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Sophia and Eve are going to be great big sisters. They are already arguing over whether the baby will like princesses or monster trucks. Clara laughed, tilting her head back to look at him. Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting the deep green of the lake. He no longer wore the tension of the city. He wore the comfortable, unhurried ease of a man who belonged. "I found a copy of the divorce papers recently," Clara confessed softly. "I kept them in a drawer. As a reminder." "What did you do with them?" "I burned them in the fireplace, along with the picture of your old penthouse." She turned in his arms, her eyes shining with quiet certainty. "We don't need reminders of the past, Marcus. We need building blocks for the future." "Then let's build," he said. He didn't pull out a flashy diamond ring. Instead, he slipped a simple handcrafted silver band onto her finger. A ring carved by a local Willow Creek artisan, bearing the subtle ripples of the lake. "It's not an empire," he murmured, "but it's real, and it's ours." "It's perfect," she confirmed. Ding his war. They had found their redemption not in regaining a lost fortune, but in the courage to choose vulnerability and presence over fear and control. The greatest wealth they possessed was the chaotic, noisy, loving kingdom they had built right here by the quiet waters of the lake. Final CTA. If you believe Marcus and Clara built a stronger love because of the sacrifice and honesty, give this video a like and share it. What is the most important foundation for a strong family? Money or presence? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for following this beautiful story of redemption. Subscribe for more sagas that touch the soul.